look at that like sign behind me, it says just keep going. I think the only reason you read these books, right, and you read these articles about just, it could be a major leaguer, it could be someone in the NHL, it could be a great politician or entrepreneur or something like that, right? And one of the tips, the themes you start seeing is that they will say that they kept going when everyone gave up.
Yeah.
And that for me is just, when I look back, that was honestly one of the things. I think it's for this business I run now. It's like, I just keep going.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode is a former Division I baseball player who went on to play professionally as well. He is now a coach, a speaker, and author, as well as much more. I've been fortunate to learn from him as well as speak alongside him. Please welcome to the Elev8 podcast, my friend, Matt Phillips.
I am doing fabulous. Fabulous start to the day, and I was up at 3:45 this morning, Tyler, taking my wife and youngest daughter to the airport, and my daughter's 12 years old. She's on a U12 club volleyball team, and they are headed to Dallas, Texas for the first like big tournament of the year. So they were excited. Up early, rocking and rolling.
I know you're good at being up early. Haven't been up early with you many mornings, and I want to come back to the sports parent conversation a little bit later, as I guess the family is headed off for that.
Yes.
But for those that don't know Matt, I've known Matt for a long time. A guy that I consider a coach, mentor, friend of my own, and has helped me, and I've learned a lot from him, and always tried to get him back on the podcast. And our schedules lined up finally, and I am pumped to have him.
Yes.
But I wanted you to start with, we'll come into more of your background too, but one of the things that always caught me was the perseverance and the resilience in your story of becoming a collegiate baseball player. And wanted to start our audience off with that story of perseverance a little bit, if you would indulge us.
Oh, absolutely will. And it's interesting, if you look right behind me, I know if you're listening on the podcast, you cannot see behind me, of course, at the moment, but there's a sign right by my head, and there's 3 words on it, and it says, just keep going. And when I look back at my athletic career, at my corporate career, and now having this business for 12 years, I think that's the secret to like why I've been able to achieve things and why I just keep going to this day. And that's really, you go right back to my athletic career, and that's what made me successful. So I'll try to give you the short story of it, of my collegiate baseball days. But I grew up here in Colorado, and it was time for me to go off to college. And I was, recruited by a junior college. I was thinking about going to the Air Force Academy, and I decided military wasn't right for me. And my path in baseball, at least, I didn't want to go the junior college route. And it was just a personal decision I made, nothing wrong with it, just what kind of where I was at the moment. And so I decided to go attend Creighton University in the Big O, for those of you from Omaha, Nebraska, shout out, and walk on. And so we have a big family history at Creighton. My mom went there, 2 uncles went there. My sister was there at the time I was deciding, and I said, I'm going to go to Creighton and walk on and play college baseball and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, long story short, I show up freshman year. They didn't know who I was. They could have probably cared less who Matt Phillips was, and that's cool. But we had our walk-on tryouts for 2 days, and we hit and threw and ran the 40-yard dash and did all that sort of stuff to test us over those 2 days. And it's so interesting. we all have those moments in life that we can recall like vividly. And maybe something went really well, maybe something went completely sideways, but we have those moments, right, that we all think of and can remember. And I remember distinctly after the second day of tryouts, each walk-on was called individually into the coach's office. And it was in kind of athletic department building. And you walk down this long hall, and all the coaches' offices are on the left and right. And the baseball coach was the last door on the left. And I remember walking down that hall, and I was nervous and like, what's going to happen, all this sort of stuff. And I sit down in front of the coach, and the head coach is sitting in front of me. The assistant coach is off to my left. And I honestly stopped listening after about 20 seconds, Tyler, of what these coaches were saying, because they had informed me that I was cut from the team. I mean, I wasn't even on the team, so I wasn't even cut. I had no chance of even being on the team. But I literally stopped listening 20 seconds afterwards. And I remember, getting up and walking out and going straight back to my dorm room. And I thanked the coaches for the opportunity, of course, before I left. And I called my dad. And as soon as he picked up, literally as soon as he said hello, I started crying. And it's because when I look back at that, as athletes, we often, and this is true of business people and coaches and teachers and all these sorts of things, we can wrap our identity into something that we do, right? And that was one of the most pivotal moments for me, because that identity was stripped from me in literally 20 seconds. And it was a really tough time for me. I started making stupid decisions, and grades started to slip, and I was drinking more than I should, and just trying to fill the time. And we can dive into it later, but through faith and through just relying on friends and family, I'm so thankful that I pulled out of it really quick. It was just a couple of months of just being silly with some decisions, where I made a decision to not touch alcohol, to start lifting 5 days a week, to start getting involved in intramural sports. And over that freshman year of college, I redefined who Matt Phillips was, right? And a lot of it was the faith and understanding like who I was. And I could do a lot of different things, right? Once I was clear of who the core of Matt Phillips was. Anyway, I'm so thankful for that. Fast forward to sophomore year, there's this one of my friends, his name's Eric Groen. Eric lives in Scottsdale, Arizona now. And he had tried out with me the freshman year, and he had actually made the team. And so going into sophomore year, first day of class, he leans over and he goes, "Matt, you need to try out again." My response was, "Eric, no thanks, man. I'm good." Right? I've moved on. I'm done with that chapter. It's closed. I'm done. Every single day, Eric would lean over in class and tell me to try out. Literally every single day. I'm not kidding when I say that. Until I finally got to a point where I prayed about it. I talked to my family about it. And I came to this conclusion of like, what is the worst thing they're going to do to me? Like, cut me? Okay. I've been there, done that. I've experienced that. I've got the knowledge and wisdom around that. And it's like, okay, because I, again, kind of moved past that point in my life. And so my best friend was the second baseman on the team, and he took me down to the cages, and I hit twice before tryouts. And I wish, Tyler, I was that story of like, you know what, I got cut freshman year and I dedicated myself and I hit like 500 balls a day and did all this stuff. I didn't. I literally did not touch a ball for a year. I was lifting weights. I put on like 25 pounds of muscle freshman year. I didn't do that. And so I hit twice before I went and tried out. And after those 2 days, again, you're called into the coach's office, and I walked down that long hall and I turned to the left, and head coach is sitting right in front of me, and a new assistant coach is off to the left. And again, I stopped listening after about 20 seconds, because that's when they had told me that I had somehow, some way, outside of I don't know how this even happened, but I actually made the baseball team. And that led me to play for the next 3 years. That led me to a professional opportunity overseas in Europe, and is the jumping off point for what I started my business about 12 years ago. And so when I look at that like sign behind me, this is just keep going. I think the only reason you read these books, right, and you read these articles about just, could be a major leaguer, it could be someone in the NHL, it could be a great politician or entrepreneur or something like that, right? And one of the tips, the themes you start seeing is that they will say that they kept going when everyone gave up.
Yeah.
And that for me is just, when I look back, that was honestly one of the things. I think it's for this business I run now. It's like I just keep going, and it's really sucks sometimes, and it's not fun sometimes. A lot of time it is, but it's just that mentality. So that's how I got to the whole college kind of playing baseball and overseas and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think being this podcast and my experience with so many student athletes too, it's one reason I've always admired that story. I think it's got a lot of different pieces between your friend and became your teammate, encouraging you.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think, even yourself, kind of one thing I wanted to touch on is being able to rebuild yourself. And I think what's interesting is you and I know, I think we've talked about this with plenty other of athletes whenever their careers, become an end, high school, college, if they're lucky to do some things beyond like yourself, is that identity. And you have to, I think that was something I went through and kind of have to redefine yourself. And I think what's
Yes.
cool about your story is you redefined who you were and then became an athlete again.
Yes.
And that isn't as usual. It's usually that redefine and get into the next phase of life, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
transition. And can you talk about how, which I also think is courageous in a college environment to do the things you did and set those standards for yourself. But can you talk about just how in life, no matter where people are at, coach, kid, business professional, happy, unhappy, that we do have that power to redefine who we are and the direction we want to go?
Oh yeah. I had a conversation with someone yesterday about this exact topic. And, I believe that each and every one of us is put on this earth for a reason, right? And we have gifts and talents that are different from other people. And, a lot of it comes from my faith background, right? I'm not going to, beat people over the head with the Bible or anything like that. But that component of it is really important to me. And whether you have a faith or not, right? If we believe that we were put on this earth for a reason to have an impact on people, and then I believe we have this opportunity every day to wake up and help drive those things and maximize those talents and gifts and impact people in a positive way and be energetic and be full of life and understand that, yeah, there's going to be ups and downs along the way, right? There's things in my business to this day that I don't want to do, but I know I have to do it. And if I do it and I do it really well or leverage people around me to help me with that stuff, then I'm going to accelerate my growth. And that I still have to, dive into my mindset and work on things for myself and my courage and my confidence and all those sorts of things. But it starts with just taking a step back for a moment, understanding like who you are and what you're about. And not I work here or I do this or I play this sport. It's like, no, like what gives you energy in the morning to get up? And it's a lot of people I talk with, it's like I want to connect with people and I want to help them improve and I want to find out what's possible within me. And we all have these different reasons, but it's understanding like that core piece to it because that's where the juice comes from, right? That's when you squeeze the orange, you get the juice, if you will, right? I've got this beautiful orange in front of me. Now I can squeeze it and like, let's go. And then we can apply to whatever. So if I coach now and I run a business and I'm a husband and I'm a father and all these different things, those are things that I do. But Matt Phillips is like much more than that, right? I'm a, energetic person out to impact people's lives. And it took me a while to get to that point. You have to reflect on it. You have to write stuff down and even ask others sometimes of like, how have I helped you? Or what do you think about me when I don't know, the impact I'm having. Like, you and I have talked about that offline of like, just you have to rely on others sometimes to see what you sometimes can't see.
Yeah.
And that's why I have coaches. That's why I'm blessed with mentors, friends like you, to be able to bring that perspective out in me. And then I can operate from that place. It's such a foundational thing, but I think often overlooked.
You bring up a good point because I think even one of my my experiences with you is one thing that you're really good at is giving people feedback and delivering it to them. I've received it. I've seen you do it to other men in coaching situations, and you're able to give feedback in a really great way. And I think that stems from listening. But for coaches or teammates looking to, you know, deliver feedback, because it's not an easy thing to do um, with our peers or people we're coaching. What are some things that helped you deliver the feedback that I at least experience it and that maybe other coaches can learn from?
Oh, and so thank you for saying that. And that means a lot to me. And, you know, you've given me feedback and I have other coaches who give me feedback and my wife who gives me feedback and kids give me feedback. And I think, first of all, we have to start from an understanding that the universe or whatever is giving us feedback all the time, right? So there's this, not to go too deep, but kind of like this energetic transaction happening, right?
Yeah.
That energy is flowing all around us. And if we start from that place of just understanding that like we're learning all the time, then, first of all, we can be open to receiving some of that feedback, right? And we have to get to that point too of like, and ask ourselves, am I willing to hear what that person has to say? And it comes in so many different formats, right? I remember when I started my business, Tyler, you reminded me of this, and I'll get to some tips here in a minute, but I had this one guy tell me, I told him I was going to break out, a friend of mine, and start my own business because I had a corporate career for a long time.
Yeah.
And I said I was going to start this business. He literally said to me, who would want to listen to what you have to say? And I was like, what? I'm like, come on, man. I'm like, I thought you were a friend of mine. Here's reality. He was a mirror, and I didn't realize it at the time. He was saying what was going on in my head. So he was echoing back the self-doubt that I was carrying from myself. And I remember being so offended by that. But my gosh, he was bang on. And what he was telling me without telling me is, Matt, you better deal with this. And you better figure that out, because if you go into the world, into this business with self-doubt, it's going to be a tough, long road. And I'm not saying it disappeared overnight. I'm not saying that, stuff doesn't even crop up to this day, but it was that feedback that came in a really unique way that I understood I needed to do something with. So with all of us, all the listeners and me included, I think we have to start from all of us from a place of like, I am willing, and make that decision. I'm willing to receive feedback, however it comes.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier, right? So what I love, like our conversations outside this podcast, is that you and I are both open to receiving feedback. And sometimes we don't like it. At least I don't.
Same.
Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't, right? But I'm open to it, and I reflect upon it. I'm like, okay, either that's right or wrong, and then I'll take an action upon that thing or not. But starting from that place makes it so much easier, right, for different people. So if you're giving feedback, one of the things is like just posing that question, or to people you're working with, like, are you open to me providing some constructive feedback right now? Are you open to a discussion on what I'm seeing? And immediately when they say yes, their defenses are down a little bit more, right? They're more open. Now they could close off right away based on what you tell them, but it's asking permission, which again, not going to the neuroscience, but like it will keep their logical part of their brain open. They won't go into fight or flight response, but it's just asking that, kind of acknowledging, like, I'm about to give you some feedback here. That's a huge thing. The other kind of tool I see work really well is you hear about, it's like the compliment sandwich, I think it's called. Is that what it's
Yeah.
called?
Yeah.
Feedback sandwich, compliment
Yeah.
sandwich, something like
Sure.
that. And you have to be a little careful with this, but you can lead. That sandwich means like you start with something like positive, and then you give the criticism or feedback in the
Yeah.
middle, and then you wrap it up with something positive at the end, right? And so it's more of a positive type feedback, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen that work well too, where I'll be talking to someone and say, I'm seeing some really good stuff on this. Like, I saw you do this, and that was really well. Like, went really well, right? I saw you do this in practice. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, if you're open to it, do you mind if I provide some feedback on this? And they'll say, yeah, well, so this part of practice, this is, and let me show you if I can, but like, this is what I saw, and this is where I see you could make this little tweak or jump or shift, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'll wrap it up with, overall, when I look at the way you practice or whatever the situation is, like, I see, again, kind of back to that positive thing. So that's worked kind of well too. But I think the biggest thing is just asking that first question of like, are you open to receiving some feedback?
Yeah.
And
And
then let them sit with it.
I loved how you brought up that. Yeah, I've heard it called the compliment sandwich, also the shit sandwich, because adults kind of know the shits in the middle, right?
Yes.
But I think what you did so beautifully is the way you intertwine both of those is the positive permission and then it.
Yes.
And both of them, once you have a relationship with those people, but I was like, sometimes in that sandwich scenario, man, if you can get that permission, um, then it is like, hey, I got a little something for you. You want some more?
Okay.
Then
Okay.
it is more of a mental proposition than a push out from you. And so great
Yeah.
feedback.
The other big thing too, Tyler, I've been talking to a lot of coaches about lately is really two things. One is, I think as human beings, we like to point out the things that are going wrong. And that's a kind of risk management, fight or flight response
Right.
type thing, right? But it's a risk management thing because we want to improve. And we sometimes forget to recognize what they're doing really well.
Yeah.
So, like, if you talk to a team, for example, about, I'll take a baseball team, for example, right? That when they're up to the plate, that everybody's at the fence, standing, right? We're not going to sit and we have to bring the energy, right? But sometimes we forget to go back to the team and be like, wow, that third inning, you guys were up the fence, you were up at the fence chirping, great energy. That was fantastic. Well, we tend to point it out only when people are sitting down and we
Yeah.
don't feel the energy. We're like, what are you guys doing? Like, get up and do the energy instead of reinforcing the behavior we want.
Right.
So that's been like a huge, huge thing that I've been talking to a lot of coaches about. And this is leaders in businesses. This is kids. This is,
Mhm.
relationship. Like, it doesn't matter. But acknowledging that and showing that, because then they're like, oh, I know what you mean. I remember that. Now I'll repeat it. And the second thing is if you can show people, and, I'm probably older than some of the listeners here, right? But back in my day, like, film wasn't a big thing. Like, it existed,
Yeah.
but it wasn't as prolific as it is now,
Right.
right? I feel like
Right.
there's film, everything's
It
filmed. And
wasn't on your phone. It was on a
right,
it was on a big reel. I watched it in high
it was
school
on
on a reel. Like,
exactly. So it's like advanced so much, and it's so unbelievable. But sometimes when we're talking, to people, also we get in this pattern. We can get in this pattern of telling instead of showing. And so the power in like pulling up a video and showing, like, look, do you see how you did that? That was amazing. And showing them the physical benefit of it, or showing them like, hey, look how you guys were. We could have improved that a little bit because it just makes it more real instead of, talking. So I say, show, it's like show and tell,
yeah.
right? Forget the tell, but just show them what you're
Mm.
talking about. And so those
Yeah.
are some other things too that I've seen work really well,
That's-
in a number of different environments.
I love that you brought up the point of coaches, catching them doing the things you want them to do, the behaviors, because I think my question to coaches in that scenario is usually, which do you want repeated? Right? It's the
Yes.
one that they're doing well, the things they're doing right, And again, it's again easiest to point out the wrong things, but you know, we want the right things repeated. We have to be intentional about
Well,
coaching those up.
when you showed a video at where we spoke at the coaches day,
Yeah,
was that
the
6 weeks ago?
Mike McDaniel.
Mike McDaniel, right? And I remember the video. He's for Tua. He showed him what did the video say? 700 like
700 big
amazing
plays.
throws,
Yeah.
something crazy like that, right? So can you imagine if you're the video guy and Mike McDaniel walks in and he goes, by the way, okay, so I'm taking over the team. Tua's coming. He's going to be our quarterback. He's the go-to. He's the future. I need you to go through all the film and find 700. He probably left it open. I don't know. Find 1,000 amazing, beautiful passes that he threw, and I need you to do that quickly. Like, I need it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the timeline was. I'm making that up, but it goes back to that point of like he showed Tua, like, you were amazing, you were great. Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this, and they watched all 700 of them. Correct?
Mhm.
I, from a coaching perspective, like, you want to fire up an athlete or fire up an employee or whoever you're dealing with, show them that stuff. They'll be like, oh my gosh, repeat, 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 repeat.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, I love that.
Eh,
I love his approach.
eh, Tell me, I mean, you talked about your experience going down the long hallway into the coach's office, and I've had new coaches in college and plenty of athletes worked with in teams experience that. And I think a lot of times in those meetings, when it's a new coach, or even if it's their same coach, it's the end of spring or the tryout, whatever it is, they start with, here's what you need to work on. It is so many times instead of
So true.
here's where your strengths are already showing up for me, as a
Yes.
coach. And I think that is just such a different one, how you're gonna engage the rest of that meeting in their feedback, is a big thing. So I think, lead with that positive. I've noticed even with like frustrated 7 and 8 year old kids at football camp, sometimes it's, hey man, your shoes are cool. can I show you something that I think will help you
Yes,
catch the ball a little bit better? Like,
exactly.
like it, and hey, I like your gloves. Can I show you how you can hold your thumbs together a little? It might help you
Yes.
catch, and sometimes just lightening the mood too, even with a high school athlete. It's like, hey, dope haircut. Can I show you something with your feet?
Yep.
Like,
So
but
true.
it's just instead of just coming after it, and even
Yes.
if it's the haircut, it's recognizing authentically who they are in some small way that they feel a little value before you teach.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and so
And
I think
reinforce
that's,
the behaviors you want and then correct the ones that you don't.
yeah,
And I remember, because I think we have such an opportunity to like set the example as coaches and administrators and all these sorts of things. I always tell the story of, because I'm such a big believer in like continuous improvement, continuous learning, right? That's why I'm reading books and listen to podcasts and do trainings and all sorts of stuff, right? And join mastermind groups and all this stuff. And I remember I went back to Creighton. So that assistant coach I told you about, the new
yeah,
one, sophomore year, is a man named Ed Service. And Ed was the assistant coach when I played. He is now the head coach at Creighton. And he's been there for years. And so every time we go back to Omaha, I go call Coach Service or spend a little time with him. And I remember distinctly one time, because for those listening who haven't been to the College World Series in Omaha, I highly, highly recommend that you go to the College World Series in Omaha each summer. It's a great environment, great experience. You get to see amazing teams. Players are going to go in the draft, and it's pretty fun. Even if you're not a baseball fan, it's a pretty fun environment, right? Lots of bars and restaurants and stuff like that you can have fun with. And so Creighton is the host, right? They play at it now. It's Schwab Park, used to be TD Ameritrade Park, and then TD Ameritrade was acquired by Charles Schwab. So it's Charles Schwab Park in Omaha, and that's where Creighton plays. So Creighton's the host, right? So like
yep,
the official host, and so some of the practices will take place at the Creighton field, right? There's a turf field on
yeah,
campus, different than the Charles Schwab Park. And I walked in one time, and there's this big bus in front of the baseball facility, and I'm like, who's here? Because it was College World Series time. And so I walk in, and Vanderbilt's practicing on the field. And Vanderbilt is a pretty darn good baseball team.
mm,
And so I walk in, and when you walk in the baseball facility, there's these huge glass windows that overlook the baseball field. And that's where all the coaches' offices are. And then there's hitting facilities downstairs, all this stuff. It's a pretty cool little setup. Anyway, so there's Coach Service when I walk in, sitting on the couch, looking out at the field. And he's got a notebook and a pen in his hand. I see him writing notes. And so I walk up, I'm like, hey, coach, how you doing? And it's like, hey, Matt. So we sit down, and I'm like, hey, what are you up to? I'm like, what are you writing on the notebook? And he goes, he's like, I love watching Vanderbilt's practice.
mm,
And I love watching all these practices. He goes, I'm taking so many notes on drills that we can run and the way they've set up the field. I mean, he's drawing pictures on the field. Like
yeah,
you could put this person stand here, this person stand here. This is how they ran the drill. And I always remember that about Coach Service, because he had this mentality of like, we can always get better, right? So again,
yeah,
point out the good, but we can always look for that edge. And that's where the most successful athletes come from. And business people is like, let's find the edge, right? What's
yeah.
the 1% that's going to get us there?
And,
I think it's down this like providing feedback in the way we do it. But Coach Service to me is still that example to this day. I talked to him 6 weeks ago and on the phone and catching up on stuff. And he was still giving me feedback on my business now. I mean, how it's shifted. It's so interesting. But that
that's
mentality is critical.
I I love coaches that have that mentality too, because I think as recent experience too at a clinic, listening to some coaches discuss some drills, there was a tendency for coaches to, oh, we do that drill. Oh, yeah, we do that. And I was like, well, let him finish and tell you how he does it,
How,
because how
yes.
he does it, he gets 25 reps in 3.5 minutes at practice, and your guys only get 10. So, yeah, it might look the same from one angle, but listen, like, and I think
Yes.
that's where, your coach, it's like, it might be the same, but not done the same. And,
Yes.
and that's where it was, hey, how do you get, figured out how to get more reps in that finite time? That's a huge, important thing as a coach, as an athlete, for us to be open to.
Oh yeah. It's back to the openness, right? Am I open to and curious to like what others are doing, even if I maybe at the end I don't agree,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna be curious and open to a new perspective, a new bit of feedback. Because that's feedback, right? Of like, this is how I run the drill. And it's like this comparison of like, well, do I run the drill the same way? Or does he or she do it better? Or does he or she do it worse than me? And if I'm closed off, I'm never going to learn anything. If I'm open, then I can be like, I might not do anything with it.
Yeah.
Just like getting coaching advice, right? Yeah, you should tweak your elbow this way, or get in this athletic position because it'll help you hit harder. Or and you'd be like, I get it. Decided, analyze it, not going to do it. But at least you're open to hearing some stuff.
Sure. Well, one of the things as we wind down, I wanted to touch on too, because I know, well, years ago, for you listeners that don't know, Matt had a group of guys we would get together about once a month, and this mastermind group. And the question here, Matt, before I tell my brief story, is about getting uncomfortable and how important that is. Is you've heard Matt talk about continuous growth, and when we would go to these once a month things, the first hour would be a workout. And one of my best memories of this was you would show up and 6 in the morning, it would be outside. So it was in Colorado. It could be December, January, could be unpleasant weather, 6 in the morning, sometimes dark, sometimes a great sunrise. And Matt would bring a health or some other professional to lead us into a workout. And you'd show up and not have any idea what the workout would entail.
Yes.
One time it was a kettlebell guy, it was great.
Yes.
And, one time, Kevin McKenzie, I know him, he showed up and, drilled us in some workouts.
It killed us. Yeah.
Another coach, I was so sore. And then one of the ones that always sticks out the most, where I definitely felt uncomfortable and really uncomfortable the next day, was he brought this woman in to do some bar with us. And we were doing this outside
That's right.
of Coors Field. And outside of stadiums, they have those little cement posts that are really, the pylons that you can't drive through. And we are doing some leg lifts and raises, holding on to those, some of us holding on to that post for dear life, and looking at Matt like, why did you bring this lady to work us out? And cars are driving by Coors Field at this hour going to work, honking at 15 men doing leg raises,
Yes.
and stuff. But yeah, it was also, I remember one of the funniest, more fun times we had with that group. It was awkward. And I remember we kind of almost encouraged the honks after a little while. But yeah, it wasn't the ideal way. It was definitely got me uncomfortable when I woke up. I did not think we were going to be doing bar in front of some people driving to work with some fit
Yes.
woman more fit than me yelling at me to raise my leg better.
Yes.
But
Our behinds looked amazing afterwards, though.
yeah, my behind definitely hurt the next day. It was a good experience. But can you talk about, you were great at that in that situation of getting us, into that unexpected discomfort and finding the growth and finding the fun, like I joked about just a minute ago, even in it. But how important is that to, back to openness, but being open to step into that discomfort and feel it and learn from it.
Oh yeah.
And I think more importantly, how can we make sure we're finding it?
Mhm. You know, Going back to that, it makes me laugh so hard because we had some pretty funny moments between that one and we did the
The frog
Zumba
thing?
workout. Remember
What the-
the frog thing was horrible too.
Oh,
And then do you remember, did you do Zumba, the whole dancing thing?
I
Were you
don't know
there
if,
for that
I
one?
don't know. I don't think I would have
So we're
remembered
like
that.
dancing around doing a Zumba workout. And this is like, I had three groups at the time. So two were all guys and then one was a mix of men and women. And I remember setting those up because like you said, Tyler, I'd bring in all these random people and I didn't know what they were going to do. I had no idea. But I was like, well, this will be interesting because, when you walk up with when something's new or different, like, that's when we get in our heads. And that's when we start making assumptions of how easy or hard something's going to be. We make assumptions of this is stupid or this is cool. And we start doubting ourselves in a lot of cases. I think we can't do that. Or we make up these expectations of like what's going to happen. And the reason I even did that and why I think it's so important is we have to challenge that voice in our head and find out how to control it, right? And there's no like perfectly controlling it because we're going to have self-doubt and interesting thoughts and might not feel like doing certain things. And that's totally normal, but it's not letting the false narrative control the action that you can take to get where you want to go. that's why I brought in all those people. Of like that whole body workout thing was ridiculous, and like it was so hard. And she was laughing at us the whole time because you women's out there listening right now, you are the stronger sex, hands down. And we saw it and we lived it that day. And the woman running it was just laughing because she's like, oh my gosh, like the women actually hold these, and we're like coming out of the squat position like every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And but it was that kind of understanding what self-talk we have going on in our head, what stories we're making up. And then in that moment, whether it's people honking or whether it's we're doing a workout that's uncomfortable, it's learning to control that and say, wait a minute, like I can push through this. I can do this. I can have fun with this other group of people. Like we can do this. And it's challenging those assumptions and expectations that we're making up that just aren't real. That's why it's important to get uncomfortable, I believe. And, you look at athletics and doing a new drill or, uh, even simple things like doing extra work after practice or on a weekend or something like that. We are all challenged with like, the excuses. I don't feel like it. This is silly. I'm going to hurt myself. I mean, think of all the excuses that we can come up with and that we do. I do. Everyone does. But it's learning to control them and challenge it and be like, wait a minute, is that really true? Am I going to hurt myself? No, but because I bet I could ask someone to make sure I'm doing the right form so that I execute the lift or the whatever properly. It's challenging that sort of stuff, and that's why I think it's so important for all of us to continue to do stuff like that.
Well, Matt, this has been as great and as highly anticipated as I expected. So I appreciate you joining us and coming on the podcast, man. It was great.
Well, thanks for having me, and for the listeners out there, and you're an athlete, coach, in administration, mom, dad, business person, it doesn't matter who you are. I challenge you to like go find out what's possible. And maybe that's a little cliche to say like, greatness is within and all this stuff. But if we come together and join efforts and have this attitude of like helping each other to push past some of those things, that's when amazing things happen. And I know it's in all the listeners. I know it's in you, Tyler. I know it's in me. And so how do we do this together to experience like a fun, fulfilling, like impactful life? I think that's what we're here to do.